Hello guys, this is your friend and we are back with a new fanfic. Which is what if Naruto get Gody powers from dead Kushina and Harem part 1. And if you enjoy this fanfic then please press the like button and subscribe to my channel for more fanfic like this. And now let's start the fanfic. Distant images chased themselves through his mind as he dreamed, blurry scenes of carnage interposed over a scarlet haze. Children wailed. Indistinct figures raced past him, calling for loved ones. Houses splintered like rotten driftwood, sundered by mighty blows. Flames roared high in the night. Everywhere he looked the world suffered greatly. Men and women valiantly fought against the attacker, a beast that defied creation. Impossibly large and more powerful than anything he could imagine, it slaughtered them with punitive ease. He saw it all, viewing the world through a shroud, watching it the village below burn. Wake up. He had to wake up. He needed to wake up. On some level the boy knew this must be a dream, worse, a nightmare, yet he found himself powerless to stir in spite of it, unable to wrest his mind away from the sordid scenes playing out around him. Like an old play that he'd memorized by heart, he knew what would happen, yet he was not its playwright and thus helpless to do anything but watch everything play out to its inevitable conclusion. He wanted to help them, indeed, his very spirit ached to aid them, but he could not. He was nothing more than a ghost bearing witness. Both part of the dream and not. Helpless to do anything but watch. To witness, as 4 stone faces shattered and crumbled away into dust. And there, looming over it all, a beast with 9 tails. A fox. It turned. It saw him. Its maw parted. Boy, wake up, boy. Harsh words jolted him out of the nightmare with a start. Tumbling off the pile of furs that served as his bed, the boy crashed to the floor in an ungainly tangle of arms and limbs. A harsh rasping resolved itself in his ears, and it took him several moments to recognize it as his own, heavy breathing. Blurry eyes took in his hands, curled white-knuckled against the floor. A pair of boots interposed themselves beside his tan palms. Knowing whom they belonged to, the boy rigidly slew the fear he knew must have manifest on his face and averted his gaze. Are you well? The gruff voice grated against his senses. Fine, father. He muttered, raising his gaze. I'm fine. Just another dream. As you say. His father was strength and will personified. A great bearded mountain of a man with skin chalk white, save for a curling crimson tattoo adorning the left side of his body. Like an immutable oak he loomed before him in stoic silence, that pale, flinty visage ever unchanging. By any comparison, the boy felt as though he were little more than a frail sapling. He had a name of course, but his sire always seemed loath to speak it for reasons unbeknownst to him. This man was simply father and he was, boy. Just as his mother was only mother, and his younger brother though seldom named was still his brother. In another life, such a moniker would have annoyed him beyond measure. Now, the boy took solace that he was acknowledged at all. Gathering himself up, he hastily dusted off his fur tunic. Silence towered over them, large and immense. What is it? The boy ventured, pushing a hand through his disheveled hair, still sleepy, yet eager to make himself useful. Are we going hunting? Do you need help with something? Or, your mother has passed. The words were simple and clean. Yet a knife twisted in the boy's heart. Oh, she has. He managed eloquently. When? That unflinching visage hardened somewhat. This morning, while he'd been asleep, she'd passed during his dreams. In disbelief, the boy staggered back a step. He almost didn't want to look. He knew what he would find there. Yet when he saw the wrapped bundle tucked aside near the door, something in him quivered. He knew without a doubt that it was her mother. Gone. Taken from this world, and he hadn't been there in her final moments. Spirits, he hadn't been there. The thought tied his guts in an ugly knot of despair deep inside him, threatening to damage him beyond repair. Mother. The one person who'd understood him. The one who'd read his name to him, the letters stitched in that blanket. Who knew the truth of where he hailed from? Who'd promised to tell him all of it, someday? Now she was gone. Soon, she would be little more than ashes. Questions skittered about in his head like restless squirrels, and the boy struggled to master them. Disbelief was the foremost among them. How had she passed so quickly? True, she hadn't been well, but something in him rebelled against it. He didn't want to believe she was gone. She was the one who'd first revealed his name to him, that he had a name in spite of all his doubts, and to have her snatched away so quickly seemed cruel. Even for the gods. He'd loved her with a love so pure that it was almost painful to think of. Mother had been his world. A light so bright that she overshadowed everyone else around her. Everything he'd ever done revolved around her. Her smile, her laughter, her gentle reproach when he made a mistake. Father had been there before her, of course, and while he craved his, but twisted as it might sound, Mother had simply been more present. He'd even dreamed of wielding her axe, one day. That the gods would allow her to die, despite all his hopes and prayers, it almost made him angry. Spit on the gods. A dark voice growled in his ear. They'd do the same of you. The sudden statement almost made the boy blink in surprise. Surely he had imagined that voice just now. Yes, surely. Still, he knew Father wouldn't like it if he pried. Even so, he asked. Was she in any pain? No. Father turned aside and made for the door. Go. Wake your brother. I must gather the wood for the fire. Wait. I can help. The boy pleaded, suddenly afraid to break the news to his sibling. I'm strong, you know I am. Just let me get my boy. As he looked on Kratos' father, he reminded himself, stooped low and scooped up Mother's wrapped corpse. No doubt he wanted it out of sight while he made his preparations. All the while he kept his back to him. Never once did he look over his shoulder. Nor did he provide the comfort he craved. He knew Father was a hard man, but even so, was it wrong for him to hold out on a ledge of hope? Instead of whatever this was. A rare spark of anger flared to life in the boy's chest, but he stubbornly stifled it. He knew Father had to be grieving in his own way. He must be. The alternative was unacceptable. So, once again, he tamped down that brief flicker of irritation and mastered his rage. Rubbing the sleep from his eyes, the boy nodded and did as he was bade. Yes, sir. A muffled grunt was Father's sole assent, then he shouldered the door aside and vanished. The boy grit his teeth and sighed. Figures. Why did I expect anything different? Theirs was a small home. It only took a few quick strides to reach the small cot that housed his sibling. Somehow, he'd managed to sleep through it all. His nightmare, Father's shouting, everything. He almost envied him for that. Anyone who could sleep through such a ruckus was blessed by the gods indeed. Though he was 2 summers younger than him, his sibling had a gift for language and the bow, and sleeping like the dead. Even now he could hear him snoring softly against the wall. It almost brought a smile to his face. While he bore wild ice blue eyes, whiskered cheeks and unruly hair the color of spun gold, Atreus took after their mother with his dark hair and pale appearance. While he remained hale and hearty, by contrast Atreus was often frail and sickly. He'd only recently recovered enough strength to venture outside. Likely because he'd been born of her. No, ruthlessly, the boy slaughtered that rebellious thought before it could take root. He wasn't to blame in this. No one was at fault, no matter how much he might wish it were so. Mother had been such an integral part of both their lives, and now that life had ended. He refused to allow his grief to get the better of him. There would be plenty of that soon enough when Mother was laid to rest. Atreus wouldn't take the news well. A scarred hand fell, shaking his shoulder. Time to wake up and face the world, little brother, he muttered softly. Rise and shine. A muffled groan greeted him. Just a few more minutes. Sorry, not this time. At first Atreus resisted him, half-heartedly batting his hand away with hands heavy from sleep, but the older boy persisted. Persistence was the key in all things where his little brother was concerned. So long as he didn't give up, he knew he'd wake up eventually, even if it made him a little cross. He'd forgive him for the rude awakening sooner or later, just as he did when sibling rivalry inevitably reared its ugly head between them. Of course they'd fuss and fight, even come to blows at times. They were siblings. In the end, they always forgave one another. It was never a matter of if, only when. They were brothers after all. NNGH, morning already. The boy grunted quietly. Need a hand. Dark eyes fluttered open under his relentless rousing at last. Fine. Taking his arm, Atreus hoisted himself upright. Eyes bleary from sleep blinked slowly, not yet aware of the tragedy that had befallen them. For a fleeting moment, the boy almost wished he'd disobeyed father and left the house after all. Anything was preferable to this. Seeing the light in the eyes of his kin and knowing his next words would snuff it out. Perhaps forever. Atreus had loved their mother deeply, deeper even than him. What was about to transpire might break him, shatter him so utterly that he'd never come together again. Yet he had to tell him. To keep this from him was not only impossible, but his brother would resent him for it. Perhaps even despise him. To tell him the truth. This was his duty as eldest. His responsibility. Where's mother? A lump lodged in his throat. Atreus glanced about their home, noting the absence of their parents and the silence that came with it. A heavy pall draped itself between the two siblings, opposite as night and day. Even so, the elder held his tongue, waiting for the younger to come around, wanting to spare him the pain as long as he could. Finally, he knew he could wait no longer. The words pounded at him, ready to burst forth from his lips at the slightest provocation, in spite of his best efforts to hold them back. Taking his brother by the shoulders, he steeled himself. She's not here. When Atreus finally spoke, he scarcely heard him. She's gone, isn't she? The boy nodded. You can cry, if you want. I won't tell father. His words trailed off into a mild grunt as the boy's head abruptly slammed against his chest. The sudden burst of strength had startled him, but he made no mention of it. He simply sat rigid atop the pile of furs, a shoulder to cry on. Small hands fisted against his tunic, gripping fiercely against them until their knuckles went white. He felt his brother's pain in that instant, as keenly as if it were his own. There was confusion, of course, dismay and anger, but also sorrow. So much so that he nearly drowned in it. He didn't trust himself to anything but sit there, one arm curled awkwardly around his sibling's shoulder. Why her, Naruto? He croaked. Why did she have to die? It's not fair. The use of his name, so rarely spoken, startled him. A lone tear rolled down his whiskered cheek. I know. He sighed. He didn't speak. He only held Atreus. Family was family after all. In the end, family was all you had. Perhaps, had he known the chain reaction mother's death would cause, he would have wept too. Not just for her, but for what was soon to come. A catastrophic series of events, all triggered by one death. One that would lead to more. Many more. It would bring about the very end of the world as they knew it, not just for this realm, but many more. One would have everything ripped away from him, yet gain so much more for his loss. The other would be cursed by both gods and men alike, forsaken in the eyes of many. Yet also blessed by others as he tore one order down and built another in its place. Together, they would lay waste to the very heavens themselves. They would suffer, they would sacrifice, and in the end, one would pay a terrible price. All this, from this single, solitary moment. But how could they have known? They were only boys, after all. This is their journey. Even as a child, Naruto had never been afraid of the flames. On the contrary, the gentle warmth of the hearth both beckoned and compelled him as a boy. It had always called to him, protected him, shielded him. His earliest memories were of fire. Watching the world burn around him as he was carried away in pale arms. Heat seldom harmed him, one might say it, he was immune to it. Call it a blessing or a curse, it was simply the truth. Even now, with his good arm thrust into the roaring flames of the pyre, the boy felt nothing. No, wait. He lied. He did feel something in the flames, a dull warmth of sorts, little more than a faint tingling in his right hand. It registered it as little more than dull warmth, rather than the searing burns he should have suffered. Yet for all his resistance to the flame, he could no sooner hold it than he could her ashes. His scarred fingers curled into a fist around warm, empty air. And still the fire raged on, consuming both wood and flesh alike, leaving him unharmed. The fire didn't bother him. It was the cold that concerned him. With her death, something had withered in him. He rarely felt the chill, but he did so now as he watched Mother burn on the pyre. Tongues of flame crept up across her shrouded body, slowly consuming her as surely as the illness that had taken her. In this instant he'd never felt so alone in his life. Father had taken Atreus out on a hunt, but he had chosen to stay behind and watch her body burn. Perhaps it was petty of him to linger so, but linger he did. His little brother had a good heart to be sure, but he'd never killed before and sorely needed the practice. He knew his sibling craved their sire's praise just as much as he. Alas, he had yet to realize how impossible that was. Why did it have to be you? He muttered, gazing into the flames. Why couldn't it be him? It's not fair. The fire held no answers for him. Though he liked it not, someone had to tend to Faye's ashes, make certain they weren't scattered by a strong wind. Or so he told himself. As the embers that fed on her fading form drifted upwards and vanished, he regretted his decisions. Cursed the world for its cruelty. Their mother was gone, left to drift away into nothing more than bittersweet memories. He felt numb, lost, unsure. Fingers clenched into fists at his side. Anger reared its ugly head. How he longed to have someone to curse, someone to lash out at. Damn the gods. Why his mother? Why did she have to die? Exclamation mark. At the thought, his anger came to a boil. Gods did nothing but take. Yet they were worthy of praise and being revered. Bah, it was nothing but arrogance and self-entitlement. If gods were really so meant to be admired, looked up to, and held in awe and admiration, then what had they ever done to earn it? Sure, it was said that they had created the world, but with all that was wrong with it, that meant the world's problems were due to the failure of the gods. And if they truly were as benevolent as some claimed, why had they allowed Mother to die? If this is what the Aesir allow, why worship them? They're no gods. The sheer thought of the loss of his mother, the hardness of the man he was raised by, and the fact that it happened, it roused something within a dark place inside of him, beckoning him closer with whispered oaths that he would never need feel this way again. And just as he stepped closer to it, if you continue down this path, you will lose much. The boy's head jerked up and blue eyes widened. Standing there at the pyre, a peerless beauty sheathed in a crimson cloak awaited him. Her scarlet hair, held back by a shawl, matched only by her ruby eyes. She seemed to embody the flame, the hearth itself, as though she were forged from the burning depths of Muspelheim, the realm of fire which was the domain of Surtur and the fire giants. And yet, the warmth she gave off, the heat that came from her had a quality of gentleness to it. For all her beauty, it was the shine of humility and modesty that was the source of that peerless majesty. What the hell, woman? Where did you come from? Greetings. She inclined her head in spite of his shock. I am. Great. Mind's playing tricks on me, he muttered, cutting her off with a wave. What are you, a hallucination? The woman sighed at his put-out remark, but rather than argue, she merely shook her head. Your heart mourns, she murmured, the words nearly lost in the roaring inferno of the pyre. Nothing seems real to you now, numbed as you are with loss. His eyes never left her as she drifted around him, inspecting the roaring flames with a passing glance. Small wonder why you dismiss me out of hand. When her words drew a growl from the blonde, she turned back to him, hands raised in surrender. Peace. I merely state what I see. A muscle jumped in the young man's jaw. And what do you see? He scoffed, turning away. You're no Aesir. If you are, you have awful timing. For the first time since they'd met, the woman's eyes lost their gentle lava glow. I do not associate with Odin and his brutes. Oh, well, then. Realizing he wouldn't be rid of this apparition so easily, Naruto finally relented. Turning to face the newcomer fully, he leashed his anger and composed his face into a stoic mask. If his mind was truly playing tricks on him, the least he could do was hear it out. The idea of conversing with someone, even a potential figment of his imagination, was infinitely appealing to drowning in his own sorrows. Maybe Mother's death had driven him mad. Perhaps this was simply the beginning of a downward spiral he'd never recover from. Somehow, he couldn't bring himself to care. What did you mean? If I continued down this path, I will lose much. The cloaked woman held her tongue. Well, out with it. Trust must be earned and maintained, young one, and I have yet to earn yours. She hesitated a moment longer beneath his icy gaze, perhaps choosing her words with care, before she finally spoke again. Perhaps I wish to spare you pain. Perhaps I know what it is like to lose one's family to rage, sadness, and misery. Anger still lingered on his lips. And why would it matter to a phantom if I did? If not for your own sake, then that of those that depend on you. The woman in the flames replied, her eyes narrowing with a hint of reproach. We both know this is true, do we not? That is reason enough. Bitter blue eyes widened at her sharp remark only to narrow at the biting truth within. Atreus. Illusion or not, this woman's words held a kernel of truth. He did have someone to look out for, someone to set an example to. As an elder sibling to Atreus, he couldn't afford to let his own despair consume him and turn him into something else. No matter how much that rage might dampen his own feelings of loss. However easy it might be to give into grief and let those feelings drive him, he must be better. No, they must be better. Exhaling softly, the boy breathed out, and his anger went with it. Thank you. I think needed to hear that. The burning woman smiled. That is good to hear. You have reasons you can't afford to lose yourself. Like he did, the man you call father is a hard one, yet not without reason. His story is one I will not speak of, save for that he knows how pitiless the divine are, how they do nothing but take and demand and take, and what it means to finally say enough. He rose a brow, and what makes you so sure about that? It is not my place to say. As he looked on burning woman's side, sagging as if a sudden weight had been thrust upon her slim shoulders. Indeed, her bright eyes almost seemed to grow dim as he looked on. Haunted. Reflecting untold depths of despair, loss, and sorrow. Whomever she was, her spirit bore a deep wound. Infinitely deeper than his own. She'd lost more than family. The way she spoke made it sound as if she'd lost her world, nay, her very reason for existing. The boy wasn't sure what caused him to draw this conclusion, only that he did. Painful memories, he asked, earning a nod in reply. Who are you, then? Illusion in the flames or not, I need to call you, well, something. Great. He was taking pity on an illusion now. What the hell was wrong with him? The woman looked up and nodded her thanks to him. A touch of amusement flitted across her face. I believe you called me woman, earlier. The boy sighed. Yeah, that was my old man talking. He muttered aside at the flames, you startled me, remember? Her expression turned pensive and for a moment, he thought she wouldn't reply. It came as something of a shock when she did. Very well. My name is Hest. Even as she spoke, the words withered on her lips. She looked past him, her eyes widening in mindless terror. Whatever she beheld behind him must have truly startled her, for it caused her to retreat without a word. As he looked on, she vanished into the smoke and heat of the pyre. The fear in her eyes startled Naruto, but when he turned to face it, he found only father and Atreus approaching from a different path. One leading from behind the house, not the one they'd taken into the forest. Much to his chagrin, the former proved as unreadable as ever, but he was alarmed to see his brother's expression. Atreus looked almost sullen. You're back. He blinked, startled. When did you? You were in your head again, boy. The crushing weight of disappointment nearly stifled his response outright, but the boy somehow pushed through it. Sorry, sir. He muttered. But at least the fire. What fire? Turning his gaze back to the flames, Naruto found only cold ashes, long since cooled by time and the elements. Not a hint of flame remained. Impossible. How long had they been conversing? Had all that truly been in his head? He almost considered telling him what he'd just witnessed, but a thorn of doubt pricked at his conscience and held him back. Father already knew about the dreams, but if he learned he was seeing things during his waking hours, then he might lose faith in him. Worse, he might deem him unready for the journey ahead. Atreus, in his boundless enthusiasm, saved him from this. We killed a troll. Naruto's right eye twitched. Is that so, little brother? He chuckled, mussing his sibling's hair. All by yourself? Atreus colored. Well, it was father mostly, but I helped. I shot it in the eye. Despite himself, the boy's lip quirked. Oh, I see. Brother, that's a terrible joke. Kratos merely grunted. He shot well, but his anger got the better of him. Even then, Naruto found himself reluctant to ask. Did you bring me back a trophy? Much to his surprise, Kratos dipped a pale hand into his satchel and lobbed a small piece of broken horn in his direction. With a baffled grin, the blonde laughed and deftly snatched it out of the air. Tucking his newfound prize away into one of the many pouches on his personage, he beamed and secured it firmly in its new home. Rare instances like these almost warmed his heart. Almost. He'd asked more out of reflex than anything else, really. Even so, father sometimes surprised him with small acts of kindness such as these. Atreus tilted his head. Brother, you're kinda scary sometimes. What do you do with all those trophies anyway? Naruto shook his head. It's a secret. He paused then, noting his brother's taut expression. Why the long face? The joy in those bright eyes dimmed somewhat. Father says I'm not ready. And you are not, Atreus. Kratos rebuked him with a harsh glance. Go inside. I must speak with your brother. Alone. Father, there's no need to. No, he growled. The younger boy flinched. But, now. A moment's hesitation passed between the three of them, and for a fleeting instant the boy wondered if his brother would obey. Naruto offered a helpless shrug and gave Atreus's shoulder a comforting squeeze, pressing his own knife into the boy's hand. Pacified by this brief show of brotherly affection, the young archer reluctantly stomped a foot into the snow and retreated toward the homestead. Kratos didn't spare his second so much as a passing glance. Instead, he took a bag from his belt and began to gather mother's ashes into the worn pouch. Once more, silence fell over father and son. None disturbed her ashes. Naruto shook his head. No, sir. You have kept up your training, then. He paused, briefly looking up from his task. The spear and shield. Naruto nodded quietly. Yes. A satisfied grunt greeted him. Good. His father rumbled. You will need them on the journey ahead. So we're doing it. Taking her ashes to the mountain. Kratos merely grunted in affirmation. Silence draped itself over them like a wet blanket after that. A pall broken only by the sound of Faye's remains being relentlessly scraped down into the bag. Even he could see that father was fumbling, trying to find words. The boy didn't mind. He knew Kratos was a man of few words. That didn't excuse his blunt actions. So often he spoke before considering the weight of his words. Not out of spite or anger, it was simply the way he was. Father was a harsh man, forged by his past, a past neither he nor Atreus knew. Perhaps they never would. Mother had always been the soft one, the kind one, and they had been content with that. Yet now that she was gone, each found themselves trying to understand a man neither knew. Mother had always understood him better than they ever could. How did you move on from that? It was experience that prevented Naruto's heart from hardening against Kratos entirely. He at least had some measure of the man he called father through the years. But Atreus lacked that experience. If things continued as they were, one of them would break, or worse. You shouldn't alienate Atreus, father. He is not ready. This time, the pale warrior did not glance up from his task. Your words will not change this. And I am, then. His voice rose in protest. You know about my problem. Father, we can't leave him here alone. He'll hate you for it. I won't. Mother wouldn't want that. My decision is final. Mother would have understood. He muttered. She would have let him go. That tattooed visage turned. What was that? I said mother would have understood. With that his temper finally slipped its leash and he rounded on the man he called father, eyes stinging. But you don't. You never understand. He gave him a hard shove, but only succeeded in stumbling backwards. Don't you see? Crimson eyes glared up at the towering mountain of a man. You're being too hard on him. Do you even care? You don't, do you? Did you even love? Boy, he regretted the words the moment they left his tongue. In an instant father loomed over him, close enough to touch. Those dark eyes burned, seemingly lit within by the sheer force of his wrath. Do not mistake my silence for lack of grief, child. He thundered at him, the sound like a giant boulders grinding down the mountainside. The road ahead is long and difficult. One of us must remain focused if we are to survive. Refusing to be cowed, the boy thrust his forehead against that of his father. What's the point in surviving if we're at each other's throats? As quickly as it had come, the spark of anger withered. With an ancient sigh, Kratos leaned back. Mourn how you wish. There, at last, a rare note of pain broke through his seemingly impenetrable facade. Leave me to my own. Naruto shrank back half a step. I didn't realize. No, how could you? Kratos exhaled, sounding old beyond his years. You do not know my ways. While he'd spoke, father had finally finished his task. Piling the last of Faye's ashes into the bag, he cinched it shut with a simple leather cord. As his son looked on, he bound it to his waist with a thick rope. Only once he'd completed this objective did he stand, rising to his full, towering height over him. Naruto fought down a flinch. He knew father wasn't trying to intimidate him, this was simply his neutral state of being. Those flinty eyes narrowed slightly, not in anger, but in rare concern, and he knew at once that he'd been had. After their brief spat, he found himself almost unwilling to continue. But something had awoken within, something that would not be denied. Something else troubles you, boy. What is it? The words burst out of him all at once. I know I'm not your son. Kratos went eerily rigid, his body stiff as stone. Boy, you will watch your tone. Still, he bowled on ahead, heedless of the danger. But I'm not, he muttered, kicking a bit of burnt wood back into the pyre. Not really. Blue eyes found his, blank and glassy. I'm not your blood. Not like Atreus. He jerked his head toward his brother, further down the trail, watching him slam the door to their home behind him with a harsh crash. You might have found me first, but after you had him, you only kept me out of pity. That's okay. I don't mind being the second fiddle. It's just, now that mother's gone, you can't treat him like that. You'll lose him. You. Strong arms took him by his shoulders. The sudden act of kindness jolted him upright. You are my son, as is your brother. Nothing can change that. Naruto chewed quietly on his lip. Did you love mother? Yes. Kratos admitted after a long painful moment. More than life itself. Well, isn't this touching? Father and son turned as one, startled by the sudden intrusion. Rather, the intruder. The soft sound of clapping drew their attention. I'd hate to interrupt this touching moment, but, no, he laughed, shaking his head. Actually, no, I'd love to. He cut an imposing figure, from the waist up, most of his upper torso sheathed in flowing azure tattoos. Yet for all his menacing appearance, despite his wild hair and scruffy beard, it was the eyes that truly frightened the boy. They were dead, vacant, yet brimming with madness. As though they'd been deprived of all sensation, leaving behind a hollow husk of a man. Something deep within him gibbered softly at the sight of that wild gaze. It was the expression of man who'd gone numb to the world. A soul who had lost everything, one who indulged in every carnal pleasure he could find, yet found no satisfaction in this. And now he came for them. Kratos stood slowly, placing himself between him and those horrid eyes. Get in the house, boy, he rumbled. Naruto growled at the words. What? No, I can hell. Do as I say. Don't run away. Now. The man's rough voice reverberated through the clearing as he approached, harsh and biting. It's no use hiding anymore. I know who you are. What's going on? Naruto hissed under his breath. Do you know him? More importantly, I know what you are. The stranger sneered. Before the boy could think to do as he'd been bade, the stranger abruptly reached them. A few swift strides devoured the distance between them. Rather than attack, however, he paused before Kratos. A strange, almost morbid fascination dawned in those dead eyes. As if he'd been searching for this one moment all his life, and having finally found it, didn't know what to do with it. Then that mad gaze found him and a different emotion blazed there, sending his stomach turning until father yet again barred his path. Naruto expected the newcomer to erupt then, to fly into a fit of fury. Quite the opposite. A hand thrust itself between them. If anything, this intervention seemed to delight the stranger. He mused, sizing the pale warrior up. Thought you'd be bigger. But you're definitely the one. Long way from home, aren't you? Kratos bristled. What do you want? The stranger grinned and edged forward. Oh, you already know the answer to that. Sneering, the man leaned around him to leer at Naruto. What's wrong, boy? Going to let daddy do all the fighting for you? A spark of anger flickered to life in Naruto's chest, demanding recompense. Whatever you seek, we do not have it. Refusing to be riled, Kratos turned away from the stranger, edging his son toward the door. You should move on. Ha! Hoarse laughter greeted him the moment he turned his back. And here I thought your kind was supposed to be so enlightened. He raised his arms, voice lilting, mocking him. So much better than us, so much smarter. Yet you hide out here in the words like a coward. Naruto felt rather than saw father exhale, a short, sharp breath of anger leaving his body. He knew this was his opportunity to retreat, to dart inside and slam the door shut behind him. Yet despite that he couldn't bring himself to move. When the door hesitantly creaked open, he immediately slapped a fist against it and hissed a low command to stay put, preventing Atreus from unwittingly wandering into the fight. Too late. He knew at once that he'd been seen. Worse, that the newcomer had seen him do it. Impossibly, the stranger's grin grew. Who was that? No one. The stranger's grin widened still further as the Spartan faced him at last. Kratos growled, deep and low in his throat. You do not want this fight. The stranger sneered. Pretty sure I do. An open palm slap cracked across his face, jerking father's bearded visage to the side. He did not retaliate. Instead, he accepted the blow stolidly, weathered the man's contempt like a stone against the ocean. A twitch of his muscled neck brought him about to face the tattooed invader once more, but this time Naruto caught the telltale glimmer of anger lurking behind those eyes. This time, when the stranger stepped forward, Kratos immediately moved to meet him, glowering down at the shorter man with the controlled fury of 1,000 warriors. Leave my home. A wide sneer greeted him. You are going to have to kill me for that to happen. Clenched knuckles barreled into his face again, and once more, Kratos didn't budge. A fist slammed home into his scarred stomach and still, he remained rooted where he stood. Irritated by his refusal to fight, the stranger snarled and struck him once more in the face, then reeled in his arm to do so again. On the fourth, he wasn't so fortunate. I warned you. A pale palm shot out and caught his fist in mid-swing, drawing a startled grunt. Eyes ablaze, Kratos twisted the stranger's arm backwards in a vicious vice, bending him over himself where he stood. With one final reluctant glance over his shoulder, he reared a wrapped arm back to strike. The stranger simply laughed. Finally, in a wordless roar, his fist rammed home against the stranger's face with a sickening crunch, flinging him head over heels into the snow. Blood burst. Cartilage cracked. Bones broke. Impossibly, the stranger's short-lived flight didn't last long. Laughing, he flopped onto his hands and knees, shaking his head in disbelief. Kratos paused, lowering his still outstretched arm. A glimmer of confusion flitted across his pale face. Naruto felt inclined to agree, given what he'd just witnessed. He'd seen his father shatter stone with a single blow. How in hell was this man still conscious? Then that gaze settled upon him. Boy, stay out of this. Yes, sir. With startling speed his sire crossed the sundered snow to the strange and snatched him up by the arm. Heedless of his morose muttering, he hoisted the man up. Staggering like a drunkard, the tattooed stranger offered little resistance. If anything, he seemed disoriented by the blow. An ember of pride flickered in Naruto's chest. He hadn't a clue of who this madman might be, but clearly he'd bitten off more than he could chew. Served him right for picking a fight. Grunting, Kratos pulled the swaying stranger upright. As they looked on, the man sighed. Fine. My turn. Without warning, the stranger struck like a coiled viper, eeling out of Kratos's grasp and lashing out with a blinding uppercut. This blow exceeded all others, colliding solidly with Kratos' chest to launch him into the air. His spinning body clipped part of the roof as he soared past. Like a bird taking flight, he rocked past, tumbling into the air. He seemed to hang there for what felt like an eternity, spinning end over end as he rended through their roof. Then gravity sank its cruel claws into him and he finally fell, plummeting to the ground with a harsh crash. Father. Laughing, the stranger turned his gaze on him. How incredibly disappointing that was. Rather, the door he protected. Who's in the house? The boy stood his ground. None of your damn business. Irked, he glowered at him for a long moment. Slowly, that bearded visage twisted into a murderous scowl. He paid no heed to his lowered head, those twitching fingers, nor the senseless gibberish escaping his gaze. He felt only crushing disappointment. He hadn't felt a thing. Not even a tingle. The old man would be up soon enough and needed to be dealt with, but for some reason the boy's response aggravated him. Perhaps because he had been the same once. Protecting others at the cost of himself. Idiot boy. He'd snuff him out right here and now for that attitude. Your turn then. A fist back. Red eyes snapped up. I'm gonna kill you. In an impossible movement, he flowed around the blow. Then he struck. Truck. Much to Balder's disbelief, the blonde dashed forward and drove his fist deep into his gut, leaving him over and retching. Enraged by the sudden surge of energy, he drove a roundhouse of his own into the boy's face. Unfortunately, in his anger, he failed to realize his opponent was being driven by something far more potent than rage. He glimpsed the crimson cloak sheathing the boy's body, a sickly red aura in the shape of a man, and thought nothing of it. That would prove his undoing. Blam! An uppercut caught the deranged deity's jaw with full force, snapping his head back. Crunch! Even as he spun to meet him, the young blonde's thrust kick smashed into his face with sound and aplomb, bending bone and crushing capillaries. Reeling, the god lurched, a strangled snarl fleeing from his lips. The acrid taste of blood flooded his mouth, a salty coppery sensation he hadn't experienced since. Wait, I felt that. In disbelief, he started, surprised by the sudden spurt of sensation. I actually felt that. A joyous laugh burst out of him, peaking in delight. I can taste this. The blood in my mouth. Everything else was still achingly numb, but to his great delight, he found he could taste again. As if a switch had been flicked somewhere deep inside him, part of the spell that bound him peeled away by whatever wretched energies that consumed the boy. Clambering to his feet, he cast the boy a rueful glance, his curiosity, sweet euphoria, piqued at long last. What did you do? He never received an answer. Well, not a coherent one, at any rate. A clawed fist closed around his face and quite suddenly, he found himself flying. Wood and timber splintered before his back as he crashed through the roof and into the backward, cast through the very same passage he'd flung Kratos. Groaning, the battered deity struggled upright, seeking his opponent. Instead he found only the Spartan, staring at him in disbelief. But not for long. A crimson comet fell out of the sky and slammed into his chest from on high, sundering the earth and sky alike in its haste to reach him. This time, Balder embraced the pain when it came and happily gave himself to the battle as twin fists crashed down on his head. Naruto saw and felt none of it as he rained down blow after blow upon his most hated enemy. Kratos could see it in his every movement, every blow that hammered down on the stranger who'd come to their home. He saw it, knew it, read it in those burning red eyes, and a part of him recoiled at the sight. Not out of fear, but recognition. This went well beyond mere anger. This was rage, wrath personified, emotions tamped down for years upon years, all released in one single cataclysmic burst of pure primal passion. A roaring flame of righteous indignation that few could douse, much less temper or control. His fists crunched down against the tattooed man's visage relentlessly. Do not touch my father. No, far worse than that. He saw himself. Boy, if the enraged youth heard his shout, he did little to show it. Seizing his prey by face, he flung Balder over the house and leapt after him, howling all the while. Now was not the time for inaction. Forcing his aging body upright, the weathered Spartan summoned the Leviathan axe back to his hand. Though its own was already plodding forward, the treasured weapon followed its new master and landed in his outstretched palm with a satisfying smack. A fresh surge of adrenaline roared through him, and within moments he found himself sprinting, running headlong toward the fresh sounds of combat. Atreus had yet to emerge from their battered cottage, and with a bellow to hide under the floorboards, the ghost of Sparta threw himself back into the brawl. He knew well what spurred the boy onward. He'd seen it once before in his misspent youth. Powerful though the boy and this fresh surge of rage might be, it had its limits. Limits that could be exploited. Where's that temper, boy? Come on. Make me feel something. Bastard. Let me go. I'll gut you. Manic laughter greeted the boy's furious declaration. Sure enough, he came upon them just as the stranger got the better of him. Though the boy bucked and fought back with near reckless abandon, his own drive found itself matched in the face of the stranger's seemingly endlessly vitality. No content to meekly allow himself to be pummeled, the tattooed man had somehow managed to pin the boy against the ground and trap one of his arms behind his back while planting a boot against his skull. Like a feral beast, the blonde struggled against his unshakable grip, that eerie restless red aura still writhing and twining against his shoulders. The sight stirred something in Kratos. Those wild eyes cut towards him then, gleaming with a shade of madness. Ah, nice of you to join us, old man. Feel like talking now? A red haze draped itself across the Spartan's vision. You will release him, and leave this place. The man merely sneered. And if I don't? With a low growl, the ashen Spartan hefted his axe, only to watch that booted foot crush against his son's skull. The sight stilled him more than any blow ever could. With that kind of strength, a simple flick of his ankle would more than suffice. The merest twitch in Naruto would die, all before he could ever hope to reach him. Even if he launched the axe at him, the stranger would still have more than enough time to do the deed. Ah, ah, ah. A finger wagged. One more step and the boy dies. Kratos bristled. Tell me what it is you seek, then. You already know. The stranger scoffed. He knew nothing. What did he want? I do not. Grimacing, Naruto made a fist with his free hand. A dull crunch near their home was the only warning before something streaked over the head of Kratos. To the untrained eye, they for more than one object arrowed towards the blonde appeared little more than typical Spartan weapons flung by an unseen hand. The spear bore a long shaft with a steel tip, sporting faded crimson tints. A long scarlet gold strip of cloth lay wrapped around its worn haft, fluttering now in the sharp breeze as it flew. But not alone. With it arced a battered shield forged of bronze scarlet, emblazoned with the Greek lambda symbol upon it, streaking unerringly towards the startled form of the stranger. The latter caromed wildly off the man's skull, sending him stumbling off his prone form. But it was the former that slammed into Naruto's now open palm. Scything his legs beneath him, the boy sprang to his feet and moved to flank the stunned Balder. For a moment it seemed luck and skill were with him, for he caught the tattooed deity just as he was climbing back to his feet. Battering him headlong with the heavy shield, he once more sent him staggering away in a daze. When the blonde moved to continue his assault, he caught a vicious right hook on the chin for his efforts. Kratos needed no further provocation. In a bolt of frozen fury, the Leviathan axe rejoined the fray. Swinging down at the stranger's side in a horizontal slash to bite deeply into his right side. A wet cough answered him as the stranger pulled himself off the frozen metal, only to find himself launched bodily into the air by the follow-up attack. Perhaps his son sensed his intent. Perhaps not. Regardless of the fact, the boy leapt back into the fray. An overhead slam from Naruto continued the combo and slammed Balder into the earth, to which Kratos whirled around and repeated the same swing, this time in the opposite direction. Caught between spear and axe, the stranger laughed as he was tossed about. Yes, that's more like it. Vicious alternating strikes descended on him from every angle. Left, right, horizontal, vertical and beyond. A storm of blows no man no god could ever hope to escape from, and throughout, he made only the most meager of efforts to defend himself. Rather, he seemed to prioritize offense over defense. Hammer-like fists metal shield and flesh alike, sparing no discrimination for either. Still they fought on, covering for one another. Where one opening emerged, another always stepped in to block, shielding the other from harm. Words were wasted here. This was the field of battle. Yet no matter how much they hammered at him, his wounds closed faster than they could inflict them. Yet the trio raged back and forth what seemed like hours, days, weeks. Finally, as all things do, the battle came to an abrupt end. A lunging downward thrust from Naruto cut the stranger's legs out from under him, just as Kratos brought his axe around for an upward smash. Caught full on by the deadly weapon, the stranger actually grunted in a short muted note of surprise and was hurled upward once more. This time, the opportunity did not go unnoticed. Got you. Roaring, Naruto came out of a roll and leapt at the still airborne deity, his body clad in that fading red aura as he stabbed down with the full length of his spear. Trapped between the honed edge of the spear and the earth, Balder's body had no choice but to yield. It was a good thrust, Kratos mused. Simple and clean. It pierced through flesh and bone effortlessly and found the heart. One final wrench ought to wedge the barbed edge firmly within the wound, hopefully binding it in place. To his disbelief, the tattooed god only laughed. Is that all? In an impossibly quick movement Balder's knee lashed out, catching the boy in his torso. Reeling from the blow, he wasn't prepared for what came next. Balder was not amused. Whatever lingering sensation he'd felt had long since faded with his wounds. Turned numb by that accursed spell. Infuriatingly, he retained the ability to taste. Thus remaining keenly aware of the blood in his mouth. Beyond that, nothing. It was painfully disappointing. No, he decided. He couldn't afford to kill this boy. Not yet. Should he die, his sole chance to feel again might well die with him. Whatever minuscule chance there might be of breaking this wretched spell curse, his mind bleated, would surely cease to exist if he ended his life, unlike Daddy Dearest over there. Of course, that didn't mean he couldn't inflict some pain. He just needed to be a bit creative in his methods. The lad seemed durable after all. You stay put, now. Ripping the spear from his own torn body, he spun and slammed it through the boy's stomach, its jagged edge erupting out his back in a shower of sickly scarlet. Red eyes snapped into blue with a gasp. Like a candle cast in the wind, the crimson aura surrounding him guttered out, a dying flame ebbing away into nothingness. In vain the boy's hands sought the wound and did the unthinkable. As two gods looked on, he seized the shaft of the spear and pulled, tearing it free in a fresh shower of viscera. Kratos nearly shouted him down for the mistake. Blood welled up between his fingers, and the boy dropped down to one knee, trying to stand, to carry on the fight, until finally he fell. No. Crimson descended over Kratos's vision in scarlet haze. Thought abandoned him and he lunged forward headlong into battle. He saw, rather than felt his body drop the axe and grapple with the stranger. As though he were outside himself somehow, watching it all, yet unable to interact with anything. In spite of everything he'd ever done, all his attempts to tamp down his rage, all his self-control, he couldn't help himself. In that moment, he wanted nothing more than to snap the stranger's neck and every bone in his body if given the chance. He knew gut wounds. They were often death to whomever received them. The boy, Naruto, he might not. Time and time again, he'd seen him heal from minor wounds, yet nothing so grievous as this one. Though he longed to go to him, to avail him of his pain, his body held sway in that moment over his mind. In the end, the rage won. The rage always won in the end. For all his fury, the tattooed deity soon proved himself nearly Kratos' equal in raw strength. Though the ground began to bend and buckle beneath them, still he strove against him, snarling obscenities. Even as they struggled against one another, their clash caused the ground to collapse underfoot, creating a progressively larger and deeper fissure beneath them. Still the two titans struggled against one another. Neither paid their bodies any heed. They fought on like gods of old, the earth sundering, world shaking. When Odin sent me here, I just needed answers, but you had to act all proud, the stranger snarled. As if to echo that cry, the world shook beneath them anew as the chasm continued to spread in miles beyond their battle. Throw whatever you have at me, I'll keep coming, and that old body will give out. But before I end this, I want you to know one thing. A mad, half-crazed smile flashed out at him. I can't feel any of this. Opening parenthesis. Scene break. Light. It flooded Naruto's vision in a thunderclap of sound, jolting him back to consciousness with a start. A spike of pain in his torso nearly drove him down into the black and silenced him altogether. Curling inward against the sudden surge of agony burning his world 1,000 shades of white, the young man grit his teeth, fighting off a silent scream. He felt the hole in his stomach as clearly as one would the loss of a limb, and the sheer pain of the wound nearly drove him mad outright. Already he could feel his body reacting the sudden injury, trying to muster up enough energy to heal him even as he bled out. Would he? Could he recover? He didn't want to die. Not like this, not when there was still so much left to do. The sudden thought of death caused the boy to tremble. If only for the uncertainty it brought with it. He'd never taken a wound like this. Some deep cuts perhaps, but nothing like this. Balder had pierced something vital with his spear, and in tearing the weapon out, he'd felt something tear. Even now his world seemed paler somehow as he looked on, draining of all color, leaving naught but gray behind. Gray. He didn't know what to do with gray. As though his life were but a canvas and the artist had left it unfinished, leaving him behind to rot. Of the forest of their home he saw nothing, only blinding, endless white. I greet thee, fallen warrior. A solemn, musical voice rang in his ears like a clarion call. Do you seek the gates of Valhalla? Incredibly those words numbed the haze of agony. Like a bomb pressed against the gaping tear, he felt some semblance of his strength return. But only a sliver. In disbelief, he strained his gaze and fought to raise his head off the snow. He almost immediately found himself wishing he hadn't done so, if only because the sight awaiting him nearly struck him blind on the spot. He saw her. In all her towering majesty. A being spirit, clad in peerless armor, hung over him, so pale as to be nearly translucent. Perhaps she was borne aloft on feathered yet seemingly tainted somehow wings of spun gold, armed and armored as if for battle, she loomed before him. Silent and regal in her majesty, she did not speak, her helmeted head simply regarding him in silent contemplation. Was he hallucinating? Seeing things? Surely he must be. Even he knew a Valkyrie when he saw one. They were warrior of legend, myth, rarely seen here in Midgard by anyone other than. Oh, if a Valkyrie was here for him, that could only mean. Who are? A slim hand extended, slender fingertips beckoning to him from within the light. I am known as Ire. Come, warrior. Her voice both dulled his senses and filled him with a strange sense of longing. Come away to your well-earned rest. I am alone in my task and the dead are many. I do not have the luxury of time. The last word reactivated Naruto. Time. I don't have time to be resting, now. Growling, The whiskered warrior crawled to his knees. Perhaps mistaking his movement for acceptance, ire reached for him. At such proximity, Naruto glimpsed the eyes lingering behind that helmet. Somehow he managed to tear his gaze away from the winged spirit and muster his senses. No, no, no. Wait. Hold it. I'm not dead. Rather fond of living, in fact. Ah, there it was. He felt a strange twitching sensation in his stomach, a sure sign that he was either about to expire altogether or his ailing body had finally cobbled together enough energy and kickstarted some semblance of regeneration. Regardless, the notion of taking the offered hand to him was immediately foreign to him, and thus he refused. He was needed here, in Midgard with his family, not the feasting halls of boorish gods who didn't give a fig for mortal affairs. No matter how tempting the idea might be. Ire's helmeted head aside, commanding his attention. Then you mean to challenge me, warrior? He glimpsed the mace at her side. Inwardly, Naruto blanched. Well, I'd rather not. Those who fought a Valkyrie and refused death became a Draugr. He remembered that much from mother's tales. Should a warrior decline the call of the Valkyrie and engage her in battle, that warrior will be burnt by the intensity of the fight and be doomed to forever roam the mortal realm as undead. Now had no desire to become one of those mindless things. Least of all while he stood at death's door. But what other alternative was there? He couldn't simply submit and leave father behind, much less Atreus, not after all he'd said and done. To simply give up now, it was unacceptable. Anathema. But I can't die. Steeling himself, he met her gaze. Not yet. A beat of silence passed between the two of them. Remarkably, the Valkyrie relented. Very well. Pain flared in his stomach, yet it was a good pain, cleansing him of the fog that had fallen over him. With a supreme effort of will he climbed to his feet. Once there he found that the bleeding had indeed ceased. In its place stood healthy pink flesh. Tender to the touch perhaps, and a bit raw, but a far cry from the great tear he'd sported moments before. As though spurred by the realization of his recovery, the light dimmed. A faint sensation of being pulled tugged at his psyche. Somewhere, the scales had tipped, and he felt himself being drawn back, color rushing back in place of the overwhelming gray. For a moment, just a fleeting instant, he caught a glimpse of paradise behind Ire's wings. Then the Valkyrie's gentle, pale hand graced his chest. Though I cannot speak for my missing sisters. Her helmet tilted, regarding him curiously. I pray that we meet again, warrior. Naruto's world rushed back. Having squeezed them shut for so long against the chaos raging outside, the light, dim though it was, proved nearly blinding for the poor boy. Even here in the dark cellar, the dank scent of musty furs pervading his nose, he still couldn't make sense of what had transpired. His ears still rang with the sound of splintered wood, of steel striking steel, the terrible sound of torn flesh. He'd only glimpsed the stranger for a mere moment before the door slammed in his face, but the sight stuck with him, that ghastly bearded face curving in a cruel smile. Even now those horrible words lingered. What have we here? Then his brother had roared at him to hide, and so he had beneath the floor, dread coiling like a silver snake within his stomach. The noises that followed would haunt his dreams for months to come. A terrible racket, a melody of destruction, as if the world were tearing itself apart around him. Steel shattered. Boulders ground themselves apart. And the screams, oh, the screams. Now all the world lay fallen silent around him, still as the grave. No, not quite silent, he realized, he heard something. A faint thumping sound scraped against his senses. Hello. His voice trembled in his ears. He hated it. Young hands strained against the hatch, to no avail. It wouldn't budge. Father had either locked it, or something terribly heavy had fallen upon it and trapped him here. Judging by the sullen creak the rickety frame offered up, Atreus suspected it was the latter. Well, this was going to be a problem. He wasn't possessed of incredible strength like his brother and father, his talents lay in the realm of archery. Precise shots were his forte, well, when he didn't miss. Could he have done something to help his family? No. The truth proved a bitter pill to swallow. Self-loathing welled up in him anew as he sank back to the floor, tucking his knees against his chest. What use was he in a fight when he couldn't even protect himself? He might be an archer, but in comparison to father, no, even his brother, he knew his skills were sorely lacking. It wasn't that he resented them, just. Aha! A harsh creak captured his attention, and with a jolt, someone ripped the hatch away to flood the room with light. Unable to stand the sudden illumination, the boy wiped his pallid cheeks and averted his gaze. Flinging up a hand, he squinted through his fingers. Discerning what he believed to be a familiar shape through the blinding radiance, joyous tears sprang to his eyes. His body betrayed him, bolting to its feet in a rush of euphoria. "You're all right," harsh coughing answered him. I wouldn't say that, little brother. When that familiar face emerged, however, Atreus nearly jerked back out of shock. A horrified gasp tore out of him before he could think to hold it back. It was Naruto, to be sure. There could be no question about that. Bright blue eyes blazed out at him, framed by stark blonde hair and whiskered cheeks. But he'd taken a beating and been bloodied for it. One eye was swollen shut, and his nose looked to have been broken and forcibly set at some point during battle. His attire appeared to have taken the worst of it, those once proud furs now battered and torn around his shoulders. Worse were his weapons. The arms of Sparta, or what remained of them, lay strapped to his torso, a dented shield covering his back alongside the pieces of a sundered spear tied to his belt. Atreus felt a pang of loss at the sight of the shattered weapon, knowing they had been his brother's favorite tool. Perhaps a talented smith might yet repair them, but given that they knew no such person, he doubted their fate. "Well, let's not keep you down there any longer," his brother declared, jarring him out of his reverie with a start. "Up we go." Reluctantly, he grasped the offered hand and allowed himself to be hoisted up over the edge. He nearly flinched when he beheld their home. Naught but shattered timber awaited his gaze. Belatedly, he realized the light stemmed not just from the door but the roof itself, as well as the southern wall. Now that he glanced about, he discovered much of their home had been flung into disarray. Someone had smashed a hole through them both without so much as a second thought. The force it must have taken to do so was worrying, to say the least. "That blood. Oh, this. Pretty sure it's mine." There was a high, wild light to his brother's gaze, as though he didn't truly see him. He'd likely gone into shock. "It's funny, really," he rambled on as he scuttled about their home. "I thought I was dead. Then I met a Valkyrie. Now I'm not. Life is strange, I suppose." Catch. His bow and quiver sailed across the room at him, the latter brimming with fresh arrows. Atreus caught them both with practice ease, slinging them over his shoulder only as an afterthought. Then and only then did the young marksman finally register the tale his beloved brother had accidentally relayed to him. "Wait." He blinked. "You died, and you saw a Valkyrie." The words tumbled out of him in a squawk. What did I miss?" Naruto paused, cradling a small satchel in his offhand. "See, it sounds less likely when you say it." Shrugging, the battered blonde slung said satchel over his shoulder and set out through the door without a second glance. Once more Atreus found himself forced to follow in his footsteps, to hasten after him lest he be left behind altogether. Even then he was hard-pressed to keep up. Their home loomed behind them like a mournful parent, bidding them farewell. Confusion spurred him to speak. "Where are we going?" Naruto didn't slow, not in the least. His sibling regarded him with a patient, if somewhat incredulous look. "We're leaving, of course," he said. "We can't stay here. That man will come back." Atreus nearly tripped over his own feet. "What?" he sputtered. "But where?" "Anywhere that isn't here." They walked in silence for a time, snow crunching beneath their boots. Atreus clutched his bow to his chest. The notion of leaving their home behind proved painful enough on its own. To do this so soon after losing mother threatened to tear his heart out altogether. Still, he trusted his brother. Naruto wasn't the sort to lie. Yes, he might be mischievous at times, and he possessed a stubborn streak a mile long, but he was also honest to a fault. He wouldn't steer him wrong, surely. What about father? Atreus pressed. We don't know where he went. He could be. His brother paused to consider. We'll just have to find him, then. Together, the two brothers determinedly set out to do just that. Opening parenthesis. With Kratos, the rage always won. Like some fell beast determined to tear him apart and feast upon his marrow, it always set upon Kratos at the worst of moments, rending his mind limb from limb, denying him the peace he sought. In the end, no matter how hard he struggled against it, his anger always got the better of him. Long hunts availed him not. Fighting only quickened the blood. For a time Faye and his family had proven a balm for his anger, yet with her passing it only became more insatiable. He knew he should take solace in the fact that he wasn't alone, yet it only made him all the more bitter. He didn't know how to be father to one son, much less two. He didn't know how to take on that role again, not without her. Now even the last remnants of that once peaceful life had been stripped away. With the stranger's arrival he'd been forced to face his old life, to succumb to the rage once more. In the end, it had triumphed. It always did. But how had that man found them? A niggling doubt nearly made him turn back, nearly spurred him to descend into the crevasse after the stranger, if only to make certain he'd perished. Surely he had. None could survive a broken neck, much less the fall that followed. Anyone who could was someone he was not prepared to face with his bare hands alone. Alone. The thought brought back a painful reminder of his failure. Naruto. The boy was gone. It had been a mortal wound to be sure. Not only had Atreus lost a brother, but he had failed a son. He should have been stronger. Faster. He had not been. Now he would return to find his bloodied corpse strewn in the snow, his eyes shut, never to open again. A light extinguished forever. To lose him as well as Faye, so soon after her untimely demise, the thought left his limbs heavy as he shuffled forward. Thus it came as something of a surprise when they met him midway. Spattered in his own blood he walked among the fallen trees, his glassy blue eyes gazing blankly up into the branches. His tan face had been reduced to a ghastly pallor almost akin to his own, as though he'd seen a ghost, but even as he looked on the color was returning to that whiskered visage. Atreus dithered mere moments before he saw him. That pale visage lit with joy, one Kratos didn't know how to reciprocate. He was glad to see them alive of course, but to express it. Father. Kratos offered a noncommittal grunt. Part of him was almost chuffed to find that his son had survived. The other, however, boy, Naruto whistled innocently. What? It wasn't me this time, I swear. The god of war loomed large over his progeny. Kratos would have none of it, none of this deflection, none of this sullen silence interposed by witty remarks. Juxtaposed to the idea of leaving him alone even after that miracle, he straightened his back and advanced, his sights set solely upon the boy who perished. It was incomprehensible. He'd seen him take that wound to his gut. Few were capable of surviving such a grievous, himself included. That his son was standing before him here, fresh as a daisy, with naught to show but a hole in his furs concerned him. The boy's mental state, more so. You were dead. Those eerie blank eyes turned down, avoiding his gaze. And now I'm not. Funny how that works. Whiskered cheeks dimpled in a slight, nervous scowl. Can we not talk about this? Strong hands settled on either side of his shoulders before he could step backward, causing him to stiffen. No. When Kratos spoke, the words emerged as a low growl. We will speak of it now. Kratos said not a word. Atreus fidgeted. Neither looked at Naruto. Their silence was expansive and ordinarily would have rattled him, had he not expected such. Really, the boy couldn't bring himself to blame them for the hush that had fallen over their little group. He understood that it wasn't their fault. Father had forced the words from him as Atreus listened. Neither knew precisely how to process the tale they were told. Fair enough. Naruto was having more than a little difficulty accepting the truth himself, and he'd been the one to experience it in the first place. By the sage, he should be dead. He had died. And yet here he was. Walking. Talking. Even now with their journey underway, he still grappled with it. Sometimes he triumphed over it. Sometimes, like his temper, it got the better of him. Sometimes he felt his blue eyes burn red in a rage that wasn't his own. Something had awoken in his soul after death and he wasn't quite sure he liked it. Still, he'd met a Valkyrie. He had seen the pearly gates of Valhalla and denied them. How many could speak to such a thing? None he knew, certainly. Take her ashes to the highest peak and spread them there. That was the task he would focus on. Nothing else. Dad, father, was a man of few words. If he had something to say, later, he would say it. By contrast, his beloved little brother looked fit to burst. No doubt he was still full of questions. There would be time enough for those last. They were each of them hollowed by grief, each adjusting in their own way. But they would get past this. They always did. Naruto smiled softly, kept walking, focused on putting one foot in front of the other. In the end, that was all a soldier, a man, could hope to do. Keep on walking, bear the trials life threw and keep on marching. For now, that was the best he ought to hope for. Take things 1 minute, 1 hour, 1 day at a time. You're falling behind, boy. Coming. He grinned and trotted after them. One day he would die for real, and on that day his death would stick. Fortunately, that day was not here. Not yet. Not now. For now, the journey continued. Just keep walking. Freya opened her eyes and found her face damp. She scowled at her weakness, dashing a tear from her cheek with the back of her fist. That wasn't what had awoken her. No, something else had. There was a disturbance in her woods. Someone had tripped one of her wards. She felt it in her bones, a presence strangely familiar, yet alien all the same. And with that feeling came dread. Had he found her at last? Tracked her down with his ravens? Would she have to flee? Where would she even go? No, if this was to be her end, then she would meet it with honor. Even if she couldn't fight back against that bastard, she would at least die with dignity. Drawing herself up from her cot, she snatched up her satchel and raised her house from beneath the earth with a wave of her hand. From there she slipped outside. A whispered spell untangled the undergrowth before her, opening the woodlands for her once more. Dappled sunlight spilled forth, the sweet light of mid-morning warming her face. Even from here she could hear the ruckus, the snapping of branches, the shouting of voices, the tearing of trees. Someone was certainly chasing something, though she knew not what. Blast it all. She was going to have to investigate this herself, wasn't she? Bare feet patted against the dirt. Slow. Too slow. Much too slow. She hated this form. Missed her long legs, she did. Was it not enough that he had ripped away her wings? That he'd trapped her here in Midgard, never to return home, to see her brother, or her family? Of course not. Cursing her wasn't enough. Odin didn't care that she'd been rendered unable to harm any living being through means magical or physical. No, crippling her wasn't enough. He wanted to humiliate her. And so he'd done this to her. For you see, Odin's spite ran deep. In a final act of cruelty, he had trapped her in this form, leaving her in the guise of a child, a mere girl, a flowering fledgling. And a small one at that. She'd lost half her height. Did he have any idea how difficult it was to cast her spells in such a state? Never mind living in such a form, tending a garden, anything at all. To build a house. Absolute ass. Just thinking of it left her seething. Damn. Damn it. Damn him to Helheim. Freya's foot caught a root as walked and she went flying with a curse, tumbling into the dirt. Dignity alone kept her face intact. She righted herself with a long-suffering sigh. Accursed little legs. Another slight to repay her oath of an ex-husband for. If she could just recover her wings she might be able to break the bindings that held her to this weaker, lesser form, this facsimile. But she didn't even know where to look. No. Dwelling on the past didn't help. Focus on the here and now. Quelling her anger, she followed the noise to its source. Soon enough her patience was rewarded. Hildisvini, her old friend, burst from the brush ahead of her. At a gallop. She spied something wrong at once. The boar was badly wounded, eyes rolling in his head, all but squealing with terror. You're hurt. She held out her arms to him. Poor thing. Come here, let me see your wounds. The reason for her old friend's terror soon became apparent as a blur of bloody red raced out of the undergrowth. A primal roar of triumph pierced the air, then said scarlet streak struck the boar and took it down like a lion would a lamb, all but hammering him into the ground. Thor himself couldn't have done better. She had time enough to glimpse blonde hair, whiskered cheeks, and wild red eyes. Clawed hands swiped down, ready to disembowel. Wait. She flung out a hand. Don't kill him, I beg you. The boy froze atop his prize, stiffening beneath her plea. He glared at her, eyes red and wild, chest heaving. No, not a boy, she realized. It would be so easy to think of him as young at a glance, but she saw deeper. There was power in this seemingly feral creature, strength sealed and suppressed so much like her own, but whatever curse he suffered from ran far deeper. For all his might, his true potential was bound by powerful magics. No, perhaps that wasn't the right word. This was magic yet not magic, a kind she'd not seen before. So much power. He'd kill her, she realized. He would absolutely kill her if she didn't think quickly. Quote. Exclamation mark quote. Peace. She held up a hand. I mean you no harm. He snarled at her in response, teeth gone sharp, eyes glowing red. Calm. She willed a thread of golden magic his way, trying to pluck him out his rage. Friendly. The boy straightened with a snarl as her words rippled over him. It was enough. Red eyes dimmed to blue and that ominous red aura around him dimmed. Wah. He blinked, coming back to himself. Looked down at the poor boar pinned beneath his boot, wheezing for breath. Oh. Touched a hand to his bloody face. Again. He muttered to himself, still palming his whiskered visage. I lost control, didn't I? I'm sorry. He turned to face her with a sheepish smile. Please tell me I didn't hurt you. He sounded so mournful in that instant. The mother in Freya wanted nothing more than to wrap him up in her arms and never let him go. She resisted by the merest of margins. Something told her the boy wouldn't much appreciate that. He didn't seem the sort, certainly not after that display. You didn't. She said instead. Would you mind letting that boar go? The boy looked down at Hildisvini, still trapped under his boot. He was meant to be our lunch. Her boar squealed out an imprecation. Don't pout. The boy clicked his tongue at him. I would have killed you quickly. Not my fault Atreus missed your vitals. Freya grimaced despite herself. He wasn't alone. Then. That might prove problematic. If there were more of his number here, her presence might be well and truly exposed. What is he to you? The boy asked of her, drawing her out of her reverie. A pet. She placed a fist on her hip and scowled his way. He's my friend. He seemed to consider her words for a moment. At length, he nodded. Up came his boot. Then I'll help you get that arrow out of him. Good. She granted him a grim nod. Hold him steady. He's losing blood. Together, they went to work, kneeling before the battered boar. Name's Naruto. The blonde said apropos of nothing. Freya hid a grimace in her work. Quote. Frig. She loathed using Odin's old nickname for her, but she dare not reveal her true name. Not a stranger such as him. Best she use an acronym to conceal herself. If others had found their way into the forest so easily, it would only be a matter of time before others wormed their way in. She'd have to prepare. Naruto's gaze narrowed on hers. Strange name. Sounds familiar. She quailed a little. I am not your enemy. Ain't me you have to convince. The brush parted behind him as someone else came crashing through. Brother. There you are. A young boy bowled into the clearing, bearing a bow on his back. I thought we lost you after you ran off. Did you kill the boar? Hildisvini squealed angrily, causing the boy to wince. Naruto only laughed. We'll find something else to eat, little brother. Frey found herself smiling despite it all. They were siblings, then. How quaint. But where were their parents? Boy. A deep, resonant voice boomed in the distance, rattling her very bones. I told you not to run ahead. Naruto winced. Before she could even think to steady herself, a great mountain of a man clad in piecemeal armor burst through a gap in the stone behind her and landed before them. His skin was pale as ash, marked by swirling red, his brow dark and stern. He paused, saw her, just as she saw him. His bearded face drew down in a grimace. Who is this? Freya stiffened, all her words turning to so much ash in her mouth. This was a god. She could sense it. He didn't hail from this realm, or even from her pantheon, but he was divine all the same. There could be no denying it. Blood stained his soul. She could see it. This was a god killer. Panic bleated in her. If he realized what she was, if he took it into his head to slay her, well, she'd not be able to do a thing about it. Her magic might have calmed Naruto, but it wouldn't work on someone like this. Naruto swept out a hand between them. She's a friend, old man. Don't get your boots in a twist. The man's face grew thunderous. Boy. The younger lad saved her from answering a painful question with one of his own. We didn't know the boar belonged to anyone. Freya favored him with a small smile, grateful for small mercies. He doesn't. He's a dear companion of mine. A dear companion, one of the few Odin hadn't taken from her. That seemed to take some of the fire out of the old god. The boy was following my command. He is not at fault. Then help fix this. She latched onto his wrist and dragged his hands down to the boar, replacing Naruto's palms to better steady her boar. Hold here, please. She didn't give him time to protest. Younger or no, she was still a commander at heart. Hold, I said. He's losing blood. The bearded god complied with an annoyed grunt, and an irritated grumble stole out of her in turn as they worked. The last of his kind in all the realm, and you try to eat him. For food. The younger boy grimaced. Target practice. Quote. Question mark exclamation mark quote. Had she still been capable of harming others, Freya would have given the little lad a good hard shake. Target practice. Naruto made miserable noise. Didn't know he was your friend. Atreus gave her a glum nod. I'm so sorry. No, it's fine. She scowled at their father. Keep that pressure on. The blame is mine. I should have kept a closer eye. Atreus whimpered a little. Will he die? She hissed. I will not let him. What followed was touch and go at best. She bid the pale man, curious that neither boy looked a thing like him, to hold the wound closed while she worked her magic. Their father remained unmoved. Naruto didn't bat an eye at it. Not so his younger brother. The little lad balked at her. You're a witch. I can't finish the healing here. She drew herself up with a grimace. My home is just beyond the trees there. You'll carry Hildisvini, yes. The pale god hesitated. His sons implored him with their glares. Freya drove the last nail into the coffin of his resistance. You're the only one who can carry him. She flung her arms out. He must not die. He conceded at the last, taking the wounded boar into his arms. This way. She jerked her chin to one side. Follow. Naruto did so, forcing his family to do the same. The two of them fell into step with one another, walking ahead of his stoic father and sullen brother. Freya didn't pay them much mind at first. She watched the whiskered warrior instead, glancing at the bemused blonde out the corner of her eye. What was he? She didn't know, and she wouldn't have her answers here in any case. Not with his family watching. So she made small talk instead. That bow is a little big for you, isn't it? My mother made it for me. The little lad clutched at it defensively. Said I'd grow into it. A most wise mother he had indeed. I've never seen you in these woods. She must miss you being away from home. She's dead. Merely speaking the words seemed to physically pain him. We're taking her ashes to the highest peak in the realms. Her brow furrowed as they walked. Ashes. Naruto heaved a sigh. It was her last wish. Though at the rate we're going. Their father rumbled a warning behind them. Boy. I'm sorry for your loss. Freya interposed before another argument could brew. We're here. And they were indeed. Her tree awaited in the clearing beyond, and beneath it, shelter. Atreus piped up first, ever curious, just as Balder had been. You live in a tree. Not in it. Below it. A wave of her hand and a muttered spell did the trick. The earth cracked and split as another of her dear friends emerged. Surely, a giant tortoise hiding her home from prying eyes. He loomed large over them, giving her guests pause, if only for a moment. Naruto whistled. Atreus rushed forward. Is he friendly? I promise you he's safe. She said it as much for the boys' sake as their father. Grumpy as he might be, she didn't miss the wonder in their young eyes. You can touch him if you like. Atreus didn't need any further prodding. You won't hurt anyone, will you? Hildisvini began to writhe in their father's arms, the boar kicking and squealing. She hastened their pace and ushered them inside. Quickly, place him on the stave there. Atreus looked around, noting the single bed as their father laid Hildisvini down upon the floor. You live alone, too. Pain stabbed at Freya's heart, tearing the scar off an old wound. She suppressed it. It's better this way. Even if it hurt, isolating herself was for the best, lest Odin try to take still more from her. A glum nod. Yeah, father doesn't like people either. Said father barked at him. Boy, well, you don't. From there it was a simple matter of distracting Naruto's father and brother with menial tasks to heal Hildisvini. Sending them out back to the garden might have been a touch excessive in hindsight, still it served her purposes. It wouldn't buy her much time, but it left her alone with him. It would be enough. Finally she could bear it no longer. Perhaps it was unwise to speak with his father and brother near, but she had to be certain. I know what you are. Do you? Though he whispered back, Naruto didn't look up, still cleaning his face of blood. And what do you think I am? He continued to wipe himself down, never once looking at her, never meeting her eyes. You seem awfully certain of something. I know you're a god. She waited for a tensing of his shoulders, anything at all, but it never came. I'm not sure if you're of this realm, but there's no mistaking it. Still no reaction. She chose a different approach. Your little brother doesn't know, does he? Your true nature. Or his own. Naruto sighed. Kratos' dad, he corrected himself, setting a hand on his dented shield, will deal with it. Such naivete. Was he truly divine, or just that stubborn? Freya almost pitied him his ignorance. The gods of these realms don't take kindly to outsiders, she warned him. Trust me, I know. When they find you, and they will, they'll make trouble for you. They already have. He raised his gaze, eyes gone dark. She noticed his injuries, healing perhaps, but still visible were one to squint. It looked like someone had punched him a great many times. She could think of only one god who used his fists. Sending Balder after such a boy. Was there no end to Odin's cruelty? Her heart ached anew and she sensed a story there. Best not to pry. Then you were lucky to escape them. We were. He considered her for a long moment. I died. She wasn't even given time to dwell on that remark, because his gaze was fixed firmly on her again. Seems we're both in the same boat. Freya. Her very soul stilled. I haven't the foggiest idea what you mean. Stop that. His fist struck the wall, producing a harsh crack. Do not lie to me. She didn't dare after that display. Rather than deny, she sat before Hildisvini and began to stroke the boar's battered dhide. What gave me away? Naruto plonked down beside her. I had my suspicions. Here at last his eyes met her, gaze biting deep. You used magic to calm me back there. I felt it. A normal witch couldn't do that. That was the power of a god, however weakened it was. And those spells just now, you're wholly in tune with nature. I may look dull, but I know my stories, and I read all about the Queen of the Valkyries when I was younger. Although, and here a wry smile curved his lips, I didn't think you'd be quite so young in person. Anger loosed her tongue. I did not choose to look like this. Aha. He gave her a rueful grin. So it is a curse, then. You just confirmed my theory. Thanks for that. Freya's face closed down. Clever boy. Dangerous boy. He'd sussed her out in an instant. She'd best be wary of him. Were she wiser and not so desperate for allies, she would have fled by now. But she was desperate. And besides, this irascible rascal had caught her eye. He'd proven himself to have a sharper wit than his younger brother, and more approachable than his father. Moreover, that power of his, it was potent. She could sense it even now, pulsing in his stomach, beating in time with his heart. It went well beyond anything she'd ever felt from the Allfather. The power to kill a god. Could such strength slay Odin? Perhaps, she began slowly, choosing her words with infinite care, the two of us can reach an accord. How so? You seek to be free from the chains binding you. Just as I do mine. When he didn't challenge her, she barreled onward. We both have no love for the gods of this realm. Our goals align. Sure. His elbow jostled hers. Whatever you say, short stuff. Freya twitched. I beg your pardon. I am not short. Sorry. Naruto set a hand to his ear. Couldn't hear you down there. Impudent. She scowled up at him. You're only a head taller than me. He waggled a brow at her, a prankster even now. Only. She scowled. You're being an. I'm trying to cheer you up, is what I'm doing. He laughed it off. You can give me a good smack if you like. Don't mind. Any mirth she might have felt died in that instant. I cannot. He laughed, not comprehending. Sure, you can. You misunderstand. I can't. His eyes widened with realization. Clever boy. He really, another curse, then. Among other things. She looked away with a bitter smile. I am a shadow of what I once was. As, I suspect, are you. Dunno about that. Naruto shrugged, leaning against the wall. My memories are fuzzy at best. A hand rose and he gazed at it as though it were foreign to him. Even if they weren't, I don't think they'd change who I am now. I want to protect those close to me. A pause followed, as he considered something. These curses of yours, did they preclude you from having friends? Her lips pursed. They do not. No. Aha. Well, there you go. Let's be friends. Freya barked a laugh at that. Demanding boy. Admit it. He snickered in return. I'm growing on ya. Indeed you are. She sighed, but the sound lacked rancor. Like a tumor. Kratos found himself somewhat concerned. Admittedly, he did not show it well. He knew he didn't. It was a source of never-ending frustration for the Spartan. He'd seldom saw his softer side these days. Even now, after all these years, he often had great difficulty expressing anything beyond simple stoicism. Some might call him blunt, laconic, reserved, even. Perhaps they had the right of it. But he was not cold as they might claim, nor was he blind to what was unfolding here before his very eyes. Hold still, you. I can't place the protection stave if you keep squirming. Naruto laughed despite the girl's admonishment, grinning as her fingers traced his neck. I'm trying, but it tickles. What he saw taking place before him. It concerned him a great deal. Kratos was not often prone to fits of introspection these days. But he found himself dwelling on such things now. This girl who tended to his eldest boy, there was more to her than met the eye. For one so small, the girl was wise in the old ways, but his concern went beyond her magics. It was her personality. She was quick to take charge, an admirable quality in a warrior, yet she was clearly too small to be one. She reminded him of Faye. A younger version, perhaps. Quick of wit, and able to coax rare responses out of him as few could these days. This, he thought, was good. The boy had been too quiet, lately. Sullen. The warrior in him wished to dismiss such things and hasten onward. They had a long road ahead and their time was wasted dallying here. Faye's voice nagged at him. He imagined what she might say. This is good for him, grumbles. Let him linger a while. He wanted to heed her voice. He was hurting from her death still. To take it out on the boy would be unfair. And yet there was the way this girl carried herself. Walked, talked, even, like an adult trapped in a child's body. Was she under a curse of some sort? Moreover, Was she a danger to them? He did not wish her such. The girl had been helpful thus far, though he was loath to admit it. They had harmed her boar after all. A debt was owed. He would see it repaid and seek better counsel before making such a judgment. Atreus appeared to have made his nevertheless. He caught his son staring from a wooden chair, grinning as his brother squabbled with the girl. Naruto had splashed some of that strange gold paint on her face, which had her admonishing him all over again, but he only laughed all the louder. She's nice, huh? The lad chuckled. Can't remember the last time I heard brother laugh like that. Kratos tried to restrain a grunt. He failed. HRRMPH. Atreus was of his blood. Yet the boy was not. Did that make him any less his son? No. He had found him alone in that strange place, within the fire and flames, and taken him in. Whatever his blood, he was his boy, even if he did not know how to woo. That, Kratos supposed, was his own fault. He'd never seen the need to teach him such. There were always more important skills to learn. Atreus did not understand. He was green. He did not see the bond blooming between these two. This fleeting connection, this tiny tenuous thread that one day, someday, perhaps years from now, might bloom into something more. Atreus could not see it. But he did. Yes, it concerned him. Very much so. Kratos did not believe in fate. Prophecies were meant to be broken. But he could not bring himself to sever this thread. A lifetime ago, he just might have. Fortunately, he was no longer that man. He would wait, for now. He would see. And if she became a danger, he would act. 0.0.0.0. Hold still, you. I can't place the protection stave if you keep squirming. I'm trying to. Naruto didn't bother to hide his smile. But it tickles. You're doing this on purpose, ain't ya? I am not. Be still. Ah. Freya exhaled in a long-suffering sigh and bit down on her smile as she traced a fresh protection stave into his neck. He'd already messed up the last one with his squirming. Even now Naruto shivered and laughed all the while, forcing her to make slow, broad strokes. For someone who'd nearly butchered a boar only a few hours ago, he seemed awfully ticklish. Come on, that tickles. She tutted a little at that. It'll do more than tickle if I don't apply this properly. That had him simmering down. His smile faded, replaced by a dour look. All right, I'll be good. Ouch. She fought down a grimace of her own, not liking the way the light had gone out his eyes just now. Was this her fault? Nonsense. She chided herself for such thoughts a second later. She was the goddess of love, battle, and fertility. Hers was not the heart of some mere maiden to be wooed, and she had sworn never to fall for that trap again. Love was a lie. Odin had proven that. There could be no such emotion when you didn't know the other party, and she certainly didn't know this brash blonde enigma of a boy. So why was she faltering so? Naruto didn't remind her of Balder. It wasn't that. No, not in the least. If anything, his antics made her think of a less drunken Thor, and wasn't that saying something? There could be no relation there, though. It just wasn't possible. Thor only had two boys the last she'd seen. Magni and Modi. Then there was Thrud. Gods, she'd been a child when she saw her last. She'd spent years in Asgard. She would have remembered someone like this, surely. Odin had done much to her, taken much from her, but he couldn't meddle with her mind. She'd prepared for such a horror, taken countermeasures he'd never been able to breach. Then why in Valhalla did this boy seem so familiar? She'd felt this feeling before. This heat, this fire, and that lightning spark in his eyes. He had a curious air about him, that of someone who'd lived a life before. She was so close to an answer, she just knew it. Could he really be a? Naruto's hand touched hers in her train of thought derailed faster than a minecart on a rickety rail. Thanks for this. He hummed at her. I appreciate it. Really, I do. She tutted and looked away. It's nothing, hey. He grabbed her and drew her close. So you're supposed to be queen of the Valkyries, eh? His lips met her ear in a soft whisper. I met a Valkyrie. Her name was Ire. Give her my regards if you see her, yeah. That girl's still alive. Just what have you seen? The boy only grinned. In that instant a spark of scarlet passed between their interlocked fingers. Frey felt something shifted in her soul. A tiny trace of her power trickled back into her. Not much. Not enough to break any of the curses binding her, not in the truest sense of the word, but she felt something loosen deep inside her all the same. A stray semblance of strength. What are you, boy? Kratos barked, diverting her attention with his deep, resonant voice. We are leaving. He shrugged, gave her a wink, and bounded after his family. See ya around. They certainly didn't linger. In a matter of moments they were gone. Freya watched them depart with a sigh. She shook her head. Foolishness. There was a certain noble savagery to this, Naruto, if one could call it such, one that worried her. He clearly wasn't cruel. If he were, poor Hildisvini never would have been butchered on the spot. And yet this strange sense of unease persisted. He'd fought Balder, no, that was something of a misnomer. He'd survived Balder. Doubtless he had Odin's eye. A distant rumble of thunder rippled through the sky. Freya took her lower lip between her teeth and worried it nervously. They would be fine, surely. Their father was a god, to say nothing of Naruto's murkier origins. Surely they could fend for themselves. She'd done her best to mark them with protection staves, even if she wasn't quite sure Naruto's had entirely taken to him. Magic seemed to slip off that one like water off a Dreki's back. There was a reason she'd had to reapply it so many times. And yet, she counted to 10, until she was certain they were gone. Perhaps she would look in on him. She whispered a spell under her breath. Faki. Her form shrank and sprouted feathers, followed by wings and a beak now as she assumed an avian form. From there it was the work of a moment to reorient herself. She'd given them more than enough of a head start by now, surely, doubtlessly they'd found the boat and set out by now. And if they hadn't, well, no point in waiting, then. What was the worst they could kept up to? Someone yelped in the distance. Big snake, very big snake. With a frustrated scree, Freya took wing and hurled after Naruto's family. 0.0.0.0. Ire struggled. She could feel the corruption eating away at her. For every soul she saved, Valkyrie or no, she had her limits. She was falling, just like the rest of her sisters. Soon enough, she too would falter. But until then, she persisted. 0.0.0.0. There wasn't enough room in the boat for all three of them. In hindsight, Naruto knew it should have been obvious. Father was rather large and tall, and although Atreus was small, there simply wasn't room enough for a third body in the little canoe. Well, there was, but having three bodies to a boat at once left them sitting dangerously low in the lake and at risk of taking on water. Thankfully that problem was easily remedied. You can walk on water. Of course he could. He wasn't sure how or why, but it was a skill his body remembered, or perhaps retained, one he'd not had a chance to use before now. The waters of the lake bubbled and hissed beneath his feet, but it held his weight, allowing him to plod after his brother and father in their little boat. Speaking of father, oh, gods. He could feel Kratos glowering at him. You did not think to mention this. Always could. He shrugged as he rubbed at his neck, unwilling to look their way. His skin itched where Freya had traced her protection spell. Everything was frozen back at the house, so I didn't use it. Tiny flecks of gold paint came away under his fingers and he panicked, yanking his hand back. Never came up. Boy, he didn't much like the way father drawled that word just now. Quote. Look. Atreus cried out before another argument could bloom between them. Out there in the fog. I see a statue. A statue did indeed loom in the midst. Kratos steered the boat towards it. Runes lay within, glimmering gold. Sacrifice your arms to the center of the water. Atreus read them with a frown, peering through the grime. Awaken again the cradle of the world. He leaned back on the boat, wearing a pensive expression. Throw our weapons into the water. Guess that won't be a problem for you too. Naruto looked to Kratos, shrugged. Atreus squirmed under their gaze. Are you gonna do it? Kratos hefted the Leviathan axe. Naruto raised his dented Spartan shield. Together they let them fly, hurtling end over end into the depths. A moment passed. Another. 3. Now. In unison, their hands rose. One returned. The other remained. Naruto hefted his soaked shield, but Kratos frowned at his still empty palm. The axe did not return. Beneath their boat, the water began to bubble. A deep, sonorous grumble shook the lake. And then, the water stirred. Perhaps stirred wasn't the right word. The lake absolutely sucked at their boat, its once peaceful surface churning into white water rapids. Naruto lost his footing and went down, would have drowned if Kratos didn't grab him and drag him into his arms. Hold on, boys. He heard a muffled grunt from Atreus. Okay. A massive shape rose from within the waters, casting them in its shadow as they looked on. Before their very eyes a great slitted eye opened, larger than all three of them put together. Still it rose, dwarfing them all, rearing back over them like oh gods, was that really a? Kratos summed it up quite nicely. What is this? Atreus gulped and whispered softly. It's the world serpent. Big snake. Naruto's mind babbled in a blind panic. Very big snake. Very big. Didn't even begin to describe this monster, this absolute behemoth rising from the water. Bigger than anything he'd ever seen. No, that wasn't quite right, was it? A sudden headache rattled his head, forcing him to grip his skull to stymie it. He'd seen something like this once before, hadn't he? Not as big, but close. The pain his temples intensified and the memory eluded him. With nary a sound the serpent opened his gaping maw and spat something out. Father's axe came tumbling down and bit into the boat. He ripped it free, brandishing it before him. Stay calm, boys. I am. Atreus grinned. This is great. Naruto balked at his little brother. In what world? Much to his chagrin the beast saw them. Its gaze followed him as he squirmed away from Kratos and settled himself to stand on the water's now calm surface once more. In that instant he could have sworn recognition passed through its gaze. It rumbled what might have been a greeting, its voice a deep bass rumble that tattled their ears, a noise he couldn't comprehend. Kratos reared back. It speaks. Yeah. Yet again, Atreus baffled him. Mom says he's friendly. Naruto flicked a look his way. What is it saying? I don't know. It loomed closer to them. No, to him. Ah, crap, nice serpent. He held up his hands in a vain attempt to ward it away. Good serpent. Please don't eat me. ... Remarkably, it did not. Instead it butted its snout against him, bringing with it the faint scent of the sea and another, more familiar smell he couldn't quite quantify. When it inhaled, Naruto nearly lost control of his legs altogether and pitched back into the water again. The serpent rumbled something else that almost sounded like a laugh and moved by to settled itself on the mountains past the lake. With his passing the water level dropped around them, but he scarcely noticed it all. Atreus certainly did. That was amazing. I thought it was gonna eat you for sure. Naruto growled, still clutching Atreus. The young boy blinked. Yeah. Shush. His little brother did, if only for a moment. Wait, there's a shipwreck way over there. See that? He stabbed a finger that way. And there's the statue of Thor. Except, I can see a lot more of him now. There's a beach over there, too. I can even see the mountain. Look it. That building's leads from the foot of it to that golden temple. There's even a dock there, next to the flag. Easy there, little brother. We'll get to it all sooner or later. Kratos rumbled an affirmative. The water dropped when the serpent rose. It was all there, just under the surface. Naruto let him talk. He was too busy trying to calm